Black man carries his injured rival home each night, and that's how their love begins. It was a cold, misty evening when a black man, weary from his training, spotted a familiar figure crumpled near the roadside. The dim light revealed his longtime rival, the one who had mocked, challenged, and battled him in every arena of life. His rival's leg was twisted unnaturally, blood soaking through his torn pants, eyes glazed with pain. For years, their relationship had been built on pride and silent hostility, but at that moment, all of it dissolved. Without a word, he knelt down, lifted his rival onto his back, and began the long walk home through the rain. The street was empty except for the echo of his footsteps and the quiet groans from the man he carried. Each step was heavier than the last, but the weight felt strangely meaningful, as if every drop of rain was washing away the bitterness they once shared. By the time he reached his small wooden house, his arms ached and his breath came short, yet he didn't stop until he laid his rival gently on the couch. He lit the fireplace, wrapped his wounds, and stayed up all night watching over him, not out of duty, but out of something deeper he didn't yet understand. When morning came, his rival stirred, confusion clouding his eyes as he realized who had saved him. He tried to speak, but could only whisper a faint thank you before sleep pulled him back under. The black man didn't reply. He simply smiled faintly and continued tending the fire. Over the next few days, the rival couldn't walk, and so the man returned every evening, bringing soup, medicine, and silence that spoke louder than words. Their old tension faded slowly, replaced by quiet glances and small gestures that carried more warmth than they ever shared before. The injured rival began to see something new in the man who carried him. Kindness, patience, and strength that came not from pride, but from compassion. The one he once called an enemy was now the only person who showed up for him. Each night they shared stories by the fire, laughter echoing softly in the wooden walls. Their rivalry had been built on proving who was stronger, but now strength meant something different. It meant caring without asking for anything in return. When the rival finally healed, he found himself standing at the same doorway where he had once been carried in, hesitant to leave. He realized that somewhere between pain and recovery, his heart had changed. The black man looked at him with the same quiet eyes, and for the first time, there was no competition, no pride, only understanding. As the sun set behind them, he whispered, "You carried me when I couldn't walk. Now I can't imagine walking without you." And in that soft confession, love found its way between two souls who had once been enemies. Their story didn't begin with victory, it began with mercy, and that made it stronger than anything they had ever fought for. For weeks, the injured rival could barely move without pain shooting up his leg, forcing him to rely on the same man he once swore he'd never need. Every evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the black man returned. Quiet, steady, carrying a bowl of warm soup in one hand and fresh bandages in the other. He never asked for thanks, never mentioned their rivalry, never reminded him of the fights or harsh words they had thrown at each other. Instead, he simply sat beside him, tending to the wounds with gentle care, sometimes humming low tunes that filled the silence of the small wooden room. At first, the rival turned away, too proud to accept kindness from someone he had once called an enemy. Shame burned in his chest, stronger than the pain in his leg. He didn't want to be seen like this. Weak, helpless, dependent on the man who had always stood taller, stronger, and calmer than him. But as days passed, that pride began to fade. The silence between them shifted from awkward to comforting. The fire crackled softly each night, and though they spoke little, there was a strange peace in their shared quiet. One night, as rain drummed against the roof and wind howled outside, the injured rival finally broke the silence. His voice was low, almost trembling as he asked, "Why are you doing this?" The man paused, looked up from the bandages, and replied with a calm smile, "Because I can't leave someone behind." Those words sank deep into him, breaking something he didn't know he'd been holding on to. Anger, resentment, maybe fear. For the first time, he looked at the man not as a rival, but as a person who had every reason to walk away, yet chose to stay. That night, something changed. When the man returned the next evening, the rival greeted him with a small nod instead of silence. By the end of the week, that nod became a conversation, and by the next, laughter began to sneak into the air between them. They spoke about small things, memories from childhood, the dreams they once had, and the regrets they never voiced aloud. The firelight danced over their faces as they talked until sleep pulled them apart. What had begun as an act of duty had turned into a ritual they both looked forward to. It was no longer about healing a broken leg. It was about mending something deeper. Each night they learned that peace wasn't born from victory, but from understanding, and that sometimes the person you least expect becomes the one who teaches you what kindness truly means. Days turned into weeks, and the injured rival slowly began to recover. Each step he took was a painful reminder of his weakness, but every time he stumbled, the black man was there, steady, patient, and wordless in his support. He never complained about the effort, though his hands bore small scars from carrying him night after night, and his shoulders carried the quiet ache of exhaustion. The rival noticed these things, the tremor in the man's hands when he thought no one was watching, the way he stayed behind even after helping him walk, pretending to fix something just to ensure he was all right. Those small details began to speak louder than any words ever could. The man who once stood across from him in competition, who fought him with unyielding pride, now stood beside him with unwavering care. It confused him, frightened him even, how quickly that care began to fill the empty spaces he never realized existed within him. One morning, as sunlight poured through the window, he decided to walk outside on his own for the first time. His leg was still weak, but determination pushed him forward. He saw the man chopping firewood, sweat glistening on his skin, muscles tense with every swing. The sight pulled at something deep inside him. Gathering his courage, he stepped closer and said softly, "You don't have to carry me anymore." The man froze, turned around, and for a moment their eyes met, two stories colliding without a single word. Then he replied, "I didn't do it because I had to." That simple sentence struck harder than any fight they had ever shared. The rival looked away, his throat tightening as emotions he'd buried began to surface. There was no rivalry left now, only gratitude and something far more fragile. From that day forward, he began to see the world differently. Each evening, they worked together, sharing meals, fixing fences, or walking along the quiet road where the first rescue had happened. The air between them grew softer, charged with unspoken feelings that neither dared to name. Sometimes their hands brushed accidentally, and though neither pulled away, both felt their hearts race in silent acknowledgement. The rival realized he was falling for the very person he once called his enemy, not because of grand gestures, but because of the way he made him feel safe, seen, and human. It was a love born not from desire, but from understanding and kindness, from late nights by the fire and from shared silences that felt like peace. Love had crept into their lives quietly, disguised as compassion, and by the time they recognized it, it was already there, steady and real. Sometimes love isn't found in moments of joy, but in the strength to care when you could walk away, and that was exactly what brought them together. Months passed, and the rival's injury finally healed, yet the habit of waiting each evening never faded. Every sunset brought back memories of the man who carried him home through the rain, who stayed beside him when everyone else disappeared. Though his body was strong again, something inside him felt incomplete, as if part of him still belonged to those quiet nights filled with warmth and unspoken care. One evening, as the golden light stretched across the yard, he saw a familiar silhouette approaching. The black man was walking toward him, his expression calm but uncertain, as though unsure if he was still welcome. Without thinking, the rival stepped forward, his heart pounding faster with every stride. When they finally stood face to face, the world around them seemed to pause. The wind softened, the noise faded, and all that remained was the silence that once connected them. For a moment neither spoke. Then, with a trembling voice, the rival said, "You carried me when I couldn't walk. Now, let me carry this with you." The black man's eyes softened, his usual guarded calm replaced with a quiet tenderness. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he reached out, his hand brushing lightly against the rival's. That single touch held the weight of every night spent in care, Every unspoken feeling and every moment they had chosen to stay when leaving would have been easier. The rivalry that had once defined them dissolved into something deeper, something neither of them had expected, but both had come to need. They stood there for a long time, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, where the colors of day and night met just as they had, two souls once opposite, now finding balance. The rival smiled faintly and whispered, "I used to think strength was about winning, but you showed me it's about compassion." The man chuckled softly and replied, "And I used to think I'd never trust you, but you proved me wrong." Their laughter mixed with the cool evening air, light and genuine, carrying away the last remnants of their old selves. From that day forward, they began to walk side by side, no longer bound by pride or competition. They shared small routines, morning walks, shared meals, and quiet nights by the same fire that once witnessed their first bond. It wasn't a love born out of grand gestures or confessions. It was built from patience, from understanding, from the moments when one chose to stay even when silence said it all. In each other, they found peace that neither victory nor rivalry had ever given them. Their story didn't begin with triumph or applause, but with healing and the courage to care. And as the night settled around them, it became clear that love had always been there, waiting quietly between every heartbeat, ready to bloom once they were brave enough to see it.